Cuba's electrical grid collapsed again on Sunday, the fourth failure in just the last 48 hours, as a looming hurricane threatens to wreak further havoc on the island's decrepit infrastructure. Cuba has said Sunday it was making headway restoring service after multiple false starts, although millions of people are still without electricity more than 2 days after the grid's initial collapse. About 11 million people live in Cuba. The clock was ticking as Hurricane Oscar bore down on the Caribbean island on Sunday, threatening to further complicate the government's efforts to reestablish service. Authorities warned, quote, an extremely dangerous situation in eastern Cuba. The entire region was largely without electricity or communication ahead of the storm, which packed winds as high as 100 miles per hour. The communist-run government canceled school through Wednesday, which is pretty unprecedented in Cuba, citing both the hurricane and the ongoing energy crisis. Officials said only essential workers should report to work on Monday.
Yeah, so the people of Cuba have always, in going back now 70 years, have had to make do with shortages of food, medicine, and fuel at times. But the crisis of the past couple of weeks, now past couple of months here, have really hit them at a historic level. We should note some of the power grid here is decades old, more than 50 or 60 years old. And so intermittent power outages are normal, but the entire island going dark repeatedly here is something that many Cubans have not experienced at this level. So there are some various videos of protests that are popping up on social media here, though they have a blockage of social media in Cuba. The communist government, the communist regime there does impose that. But we are seeing signs that the people are discontent. And this comes for a variety of reasons why Cuba is in such disarray. One, they depend on imports to feed their very obsolete oil-fired power plants. Fuel deliveries have dropped significantly this year because who do they depend on? Venezuela, Russia, and Mexico, who have all slashed their exports to Cuba. Venezuela is their key ally. They've depended on them. They're nearby. And Venezuela has its own problems, trying to supply its own market because the Venezuelan government has fallen apart. They can't even produce enough oil. They're at basically a minuscule amount of where they were a decade ago. So they have cut their deliveries of subsidized oil to Cuba. That's made it more costly. Then you have the Mexican government, the new government there, that's also cut flows to Cuba. And Russia, well, they're involved in the war in Ukraine and have their own energy issues, so they haven't been able to support Cuba. So while there has been variations of a U.S. trade embargo here, going back to John F. Kennedy, and so the Cubans are very quick to blame the U.S., it's the U.S. trade embargo, they've had alternatives. They've been a client state of the then Soviet Union, then Russia, then Venezuela for years. But now those countries have their own problems. And so Cuba is left on its own here.